Hi everyone, just a quick message before today's podcast episode. We've got some really exciting news, and that is that we are delighted to announce that we are going to be joined once a month by Connor Schwab from Sage Outdoor Advisory, who's going to be a co-host with me on an episode once every month. I've known Connor for over a year now. We've become good friends. I first met him when we were scouting out the North American glamping industry prior to the launch of Glampitect North America. We've since grew our relationship over the months, and we've exchanged a lot of business. And he's actually come on the podcast twice, which is how you may remember him. He's given some really good insights into the data and financial sides of the glamping industry, and that's what we hope he's going to lean into in the episodes that he is co-hosting with me. So Connor, just before we get into today's episode, would you like to just share a few thoughts on what you think you're going to bring to the podcast?
Thank you, Nick, and it's an honor to be here. I've been so impressed with how much value you've been able to bring to the industry through this podcast and basically becoming, the voice of the glamping industry. So it's an honor to get to be a part of this, and it's something that's certainly close to my heart. I kind of got into the space in 2018 when I did my MBA in glamping and privatized camping, and was looking to launch my own business. So I've been in the shoes of the entrepreneur bootstrapping, and then I ended up having an opportunity to come work at Sage Outdoor Advisory. And what we do is we essentially do feasibility studies and appraisals for launching outdoor hospitality and glamping projects across the US. We've actually done 230. And so that gives me a chance to look at, hundreds of projects in the country. And essentially we're really diving into the numbers and the financial projections to make sure that they make sense, and helping people refine their models so that they can run a profitable business. So we're looking a lot at the numbers, looking a lot at the data. And so, we thought that would be a good insight that I could bring to the listeners. So happy to be here.
Amazing. As I say, we're delighted to have Connor on. He's going to be joining us once a month. And that's starting today's episode with the amazing Sarah Dusek from Under Canvas. So without further ado, on to today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Starter Glamping Business Podcast. We are doubly excited today. Not only do we have a really special guest, we've also got our good friend Connor Schwab's first appearance as the co-host on this podcast. So Connor, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
And today's guest is one of the most impressive people we've had on the podcast. Really, she's the pioneer of the North American glamping industry. She's the founder of Under Canvas, which, as you're probably aware, is one of the best known brands in the glamping industry in not just North America, but the world. And we're really excited to dig into her background, Under Canvas's founding story, and all the trials and tribulations they had along the way as well. Connor, I know you've also got a few words you want to say about Sarah to tee things up as well.
Yeah, Nick, when you asked me to be a co-host on the show, to have some special guests, I knew I wanted the first guest to be Sarah, and that's kind of for two major reasons. And one is I don't think the North American kind of glamping industry would really be here, or certainly not in the form that it's at, without Sarah and the role that she played as a pioneer. Especially, I've been kind of following Under Canvas since I did my master's in 2018, and doing a lot of feasibility studies and business projections in the industry. I can't tell you how important it is for new launching businesses to be able to point to a successful business in the industry and say, oh, hey, Under Canvas is doing this and being successful in this way. So that gives maybe trepidatious investors the confidence to go into a new and largely unproven market like glamping. And what's crazy is that when Sarah came into this market, there was no one for her to point to here. There was no one for her to go to her investors and say, hey, this business is doing well in this market, we think we can too. She had to build it from the ground up, which is incredibly difficult. And kind of the success that you've had throughout your journey is remarkable. And I think the second thing, which is close to my own heart, is that with Under Canvas, as well as with your new ventures with Enigma and Quivertree collection, they're very purpose-driven and grounded in kind of a higher calling and in environmental stewardship and conservation, women in entrepreneurship. And I just think it's so impressive how you've joined those two things, and being a successful entrepreneur, but also having this greater underlying purpose that kind of grounds what you do. And I think they feed off each other so well. And you're just a great role model to everyone in the industry. So thanks for everything you've done for everyone in the industry. We owe you a lot, and I'm super excited for this episode.
Thanks.
I think you should just replace me, Connor. That was a far better intro than I've ever done. So, Sarah, before we dive into the whole story of Under Canvas, there's, as I say, there are a lot of risks taken, a lot of trailblazing, and it's a really exciting journey. But before we go into all of that, could you just explain for those who aren't aware what Under Canvas is, kind of the experiences you create, the structures you have, and just give a general overview of the business?
Yeah, when we launched Under Canvas, the idea was to recreate the African safari experience in the United States. So what we ended up building was large-scale tented camps outside of national parks across the US. And we started with one. We started with where my husband's from. I married a Montanan almost 20 years ago. And when I first got to Montana, there was a lot of tears because there's not a lot of people in Montana. Montana looks a lot like Africa, and I had spent my early 20s in Africa with big, wide open spaces, prairies, lots of wild animals. But that's when we had this crazy idea that maybe we could make the wild a bit more tame, in that we could, enhance being out in the wilderness without it being scary and without it being uncomfortable and without it being difficult or dirty to do. So that was the idea. Could we really recreate something that has been in existence for like over 100 years in Africa and bring it to the United States in a way that would work for the American market?
Okay, and today, like Under Canvas, you've got kind of the main brand. You've also got a sister brand. So how many locations do you have? How many structures do you have deployed? And could you just tell us a little bit about the main brand and then the sister brand as well?
Yeah, I think we're at 12 locations now. I may have lost track. I think we're 12, but there's always somewhere new opening, and this year was no different. And the sister brand was launched this year with the idea of creating an even more upscale product in a great market for us, which is in just outside of Moab. And that was launched on an amazing piece of property with its own arch, its own, lots of trails, lots of space to explore right there at the camp itself. And that is called Illume. And Illume launched this year for the first time.
Great. And so, you said you're trying to recreate the kind of African safari experience in a little bit more of a tamer environment. Could you just give us a little bit of background into yourself and your husband's sort of backstory and how you went from there to actually deciding to go for this and launching that first pilot location?
Yeah, well, maybe the most interesting thing to note is that we did not have a background in hospitality. We did not have MBAs. But we were, as Connor said at the beginning, definitely both pioneers. So my husband and I had both worked for aid agencies in our early 20s, and me first in Africa and then both together in the Far East thereafter. And I think one of the things that drove us both, still drives us both, is this idea of, I call myself an unashamed, save the world kind of person. But we were sort of driven by trying to solve some of the world's big problems, and got disillusioned with working for aid agencies because we really weren't feeling like we were making enough progress, not really driving enough change, feeling like we were, definitely making an impact on the direct people that we were working with, but not driving any long-lasting solutions. And that really started a journey into questioning whether aid agencies were the right vehicle for driving the biggest change. I went and did a master's, Nick, at the University of Manchester to answer this question. Could business also do good? So in my head, coming from an aid agency, business was like the dark side. I mean, it was like making money, capitalism was like this terrible evil in the world that was destroying our world and making people's lives terrible and all the rest of it. And so that was the place, that was the starting point I was coming from. And as I started to think about, business and business being a vehicle that really is about solving a problem, any business, You have a problem that you're trying to solve, and you're trying to create a sustainable solution that makes money and creates a business. But this idea of, could that sustainable, problem-solving vehicle actually do good as well as make money? And that was the question I started to wrestle with in the late 2000s, when I was sort of coming into my early 30s and burnt out from a career overseas, working for non-profit organizations, and really questioning, what am I going to do with myself if I don't do this? And how am I going to save the world if this doesn't work? But which started an amazing journey and started us thinking about different vehicles, different ideas. And this was really before impact investing was a thing, ESG was not a thing. It was very, very early days with that kind of thinking. But it led us to a crazy idea and led us to realize, well, if we want to do some good in the world and we think business is the answer, we better figure out having a business and starting a business.
Hi everyone, Nick from Glampitect North America here, and I've just got a very quick message to announce some extremely exciting news. Since launching in July 2022, Glampitect North America has made a name for itself in the North American glamping industry. We've consulted on over 40 glamping projects, accumulated over 47,000 podcast downloads and plays, and we're now ready to take the next step. And with that, we're absolutely delighted to announce that we're beginning the process of developing our own glamping projects. We want you to be involved. There are more details to come, but for now, we're taking expressions of interest from prospective investors. We've assembled an absolutely all-star team to make this happen, and that includes a guy who sold his glamping business for over $5 million, as well as a director at Getaway, who are one of the biggest glamping companies in the world, and of course me. So we're so excited to get this going. It's been a long time coming and we can't wait to get you involved. So all you have to do is fill out the form in the description of this episode and we'll be in touch with more information very soon. We can't wait to hear from you and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, so you went for your kind of pilot location, which if I'm right, if my research has been done properly, it didn't quite go as planned.
It was a disaster.
Okay, well there you go, it was a disaster. So that was, I think the consensus was that the location wasn't quite right, and maybe you might have been okay in 2023 with the market the way it is, but certainly when glamping wasn't necessarily a thing, certainly in that economic climate as well. So you went from kind of an initial failure, and you bravely decided to go again, which I think most people wouldn't even go for it in the first place, let alone sort of go again after an initial failure. So tell us about that decision and how you made that to go from something that didn't quite work to just going again and ultimately leading to the huge success that Under Canvas has been.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of the most interesting things that often people get wrong when thinking about business is that they think there's a straight line between, zero and hero. And there really isn't. There's really a lot of mistakes, a lot of failures, a lot of things that you wish you had done differently, or that now you've got some knowledge and that you wouldn't do it like that again. And the reality is when you're starting anything for the first time, there's so much you don't know. And there's so many things to figure out. And if you're doing something that nobody's ever done before, like we were, there's no frame of reference to go to and say, well, these guys do it like this, and so it must therefore work, and I can do it like that. So that was really hard for us. But what my biggest takeaway really was, failures are just learning, right? And the faster you learn, the faster you can get something right, the faster you can change, the faster you can hit a home run. And so what we did was we understood what wasn't working, but we also understood what was working. Our failure was not like, well, everything about this is a failure. I mean, we weren't making any money, but there was something there. And we knew we had a product that people wanted because people were still calling us and people were wanting to ask, where do we get our tents? And, where can I do this? And how can I do this? And there was something that we realized that there was demand in the market, that there was a product that people wanted. We just had to figure out how to serve the clients in a way that they actually wanted to be served rather than the way that we were originally serving them.
Could you share a couple of those lessons from the first side of things? You were like, all right, we're definitely going to keep doing this, and maybe we're going to not do this anymore.
Yeah. Well, we started on my in-laws farm and ranch in Montana, which is in the middle of nowhere. And so location was definitely a problem for us. It was really hard to convince people to come to us to trial an unknown concept, right, in an unknown place. That was too many unknowns for the guest. So, the first thing is, how can you eliminate some of the barriers for your customer? How do you make something accessible to them? And certainly location was an inaccessible thing for them. So strike number one. But what we realized was that people did like our tents. So our product was good. What that was telling us was our product was good. There was interest, there was intrigue, there was desire, there was a fascination with this idea of sleeping out under the stars in a tent, but maybe the tent having a really nice bathroom and proper beds and lovely furniture and all the rest of it. So that was a sort of aha moment. It's like there's something here that's great about the product. The question is how are we executing and where are we executing and how do we service guests and how do we attract guests, and because this business is all about getting people to come and stay with you, right, and enjoy the experience that you want to provide for them. So then you have to figure out what do the customers really want and how do I reach them.
Okay, and you pivoted, you went for the second attempt, and this one was obviously much more successful. It was right near Yellowstone National Park, am I right in saying?
Actually, that was my third attempt.
Oh, your third. Failed my research. Where was the first one then?
I had a second attempt in between those two things.
Oh, right.
And the second attempt was we started a tent event company. So we took our glamping tents around the country for people's weddings, events, family reunions, etc., which was much more successful, and people loved it. So we figured out, maybe take the product to the people rather than trying to get the people to the product, which was a fantastic little business. But what I eventually realized about that business was it wasn't scalable, and we wanted to build something that was much bigger, had much more potential. And the event business really had a ceiling. And whilst it was a great business, there was a limit to what we thought we could do, just because we were reliant on people hosting their own events, which sparked the third idea, which was, can we still take the tents to the people? Can we still go where the people are going? And can we give them an incredible tented hotel experience? Can we create, events for them? So effectively, can we be your hotel for you outside of a national park? So that was our original final version of our concept.
And how much of the difference in success between the third attempt and the first attempt do you put down to the location?
I probably 90%. Yeah, I mean, not just the location. I think the whole concept as a whole. We had a very different business model with our first attempt. So our first attempt was a very small, private, upscale camp. We had 4 tents. Was designed to be private. Was seasonal, and the audience was quite niche. So we definitely became more mainstream, became focused on serving a larger audience and figuring out how we attract a larger clientele. So location definitely a big piece of that.
Okay, and so this, you finally got it right on this third attempt, and things were clearly going well and you were profitable. Some people might have just stopped there and just enjoyed that profitable, successful site where they can kind of change their lifestyle and maybe live off the land. But you decided to go bigger and scale and create what eventually became a nationwide brand. So was that always the intention, to really sort of go from location to location, or did you just wake up one day and just decide to go like that and say we're going to scale this thing?
I did wake up one day and decide we were going to do that. Yeah. It was a bit of an aha moment, really. After, I will not lie, our first season in Yellowstone was a complete chaos, disaster zone. We didn't know how to run a hotel, one. We didn't have enough staff. We were doing everything ourselves. I mean, it was exhausting. I had 2 young children. I had a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old when we opened in our first year in Yellowstone. I was still nursing a baby. So it was brutal. It was brutal on almost every front. But in that madness, I realized, and after 3 years of trying to find a business model that worked, I realized we had something. I realized that demand that we had, the business model that we had started to create was actually working. There was something there. There felt like that we had some substance. We could have just doubled down and decided to improve what we had, which we did do. But at the same time, I just felt like this is an opportunity, and these kind of moments come around once in a lifetime, right? I kind of felt like in my bones, I have a gift right here in my hands. We have discovered something that has the potential to be truly extraordinary, and we could do really great things. And remember, my big driver's driving impact, and I just felt like if we could do something bigger, the impact that we could make through that company could be infinitely larger. And so that's really what, I remember one of the staff, it was only 6 of us that first season, and we had 35 tents up, so it was mental. One of my staff members said to me at the end of the season, "Do you think you'll do this again?" And I went, "Yeah, of course. And I'm going to do more of them." And he went, "Wait, what? Are you crazy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I probably am crazy, but I think we're onto something. And there's a lot of work to do here, and we've got to polish this product, and we've got to refine the business, and we've got to bring in people who know what they're doing. And we've got to organize this chaos. But I think we're onto something. And whatever the business, I think when I've got something, there's something here. There's just something, I can't put my fingers on it, but there's something here. And you've got to follow it, and you've got to see what happens.
I feel like if you can run your first season in Yellowstone, which is arguably the most difficult market from a seasonality perspective. I mean, it's for the listeners, it's basically a 4-month season, and Yellowstone gets the highest visitation of any national park in the country, maybe even the world in those 4 months. And then basically, it might still be snowing in May, and it will probably start snowing in early October.
September. We've had snow every year through the summer in Yellowstone, even in August. So yeah, the weather is brutal.
Did it feel easier from there? Because you definitely didn't take the easy way out. So I feel like if you can handle Yellowstone,
Yeah.
the other locations must have been a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, that's kind of what we always said to ourselves. My husband and I, throughout our careers, have often said, nothing will be as bad as Yellowstone. So if we could handle Yellowstone, and arguably, Yellowstone was make or break for us as a family and for this business idea. And if that didn't work, we were definitely done. But, we've looked back on it and gone, well, we survived that, and we made that work and figured that out. So we can probably do anything. So it definitely was one of those sort of water benchmark marks of this is a line in the sand.
Yeah, what an entrepreneurial war story.
Yeah, I mean, that year we could spend the hour talking about war stories just from that first year.
I bet.
I think everything you've said so far, starting the first location, scaling is kind of easier said than done. There's a whole load of, it sounds straightforward looking back and when you've got 12 locations, but as you say, you're kind of in the trenches. We had Mike Munt, your friend Mike Munt on the podcast in the last episode, and they were literally digging trenches. So you're quite literally in the trenches for the first few years.
Yeah,
and so, when it came to beginning to scale, again, probably easier said than done. There's a lot that goes into that. You probably had to professionalize a lot, bring in some new people. So was there anything in particular that allowed you that you would say, looking back, allowed you to scale? I don't know whether you would say you scaled smoothly, but certainly scaled successfully. Was there anything you did, any people you brought in, etc., that helped you do that?
Yeah, I brought in someone who knew how to run a hotel. That was by far and above the most important and the biggest thing I could have done to help us be successful. I needed someone who could put systems and processes in place and help us run a professional organization. And bringing a COO on was was effectively that move for us. It kind of catapulted us from being mom and pop, running a side hustle. It wasn't our side hustle, but it was just doing it the way we thought we should do it, to doing things the way that professional hotels do things. And that really set the company apart, I think, and really set the standard for, hey, we are trying to create a new type of hotel. And as Connor, you said at the beginning, I think that was one of the most significant things for the industry, was really this idea of, we are a real asset class. We're not just a lifestyle bunch of hippies who want to create an alternative way to, go on holiday. This is a real asset class. This is a real business. It's a professional organization. And we want it to be like the Marriott of the outdoor hospitality space, and be as professional as a major hotel company. So that for me was probably the most important and most significant thing we did. And of course then it freed us up to think about growing, right? When I took someone on to handle the operations, it freed me up to go think about, okay, where are we going to go next? What are we going to do next? How are we going to do that?
Could you share a little bit more about what maybe like the big impact systems they brought in? Like, was it reservation management system, room turnover service, advertising, or like anything in particular about like what was really high impact and smoothing that out?
All of the above, but I think hiring proper staffing our business appropriately and properly, understanding how room turnovers should be done and doing them efficiently and managing people efficiently. I still probably manage most of our marketing and our reservations, but putting in a property management system, and so that we could track rooms better and just operate efficiently, and have real systems in place for ordering product and replacing supplies, and all of those things became really important.
Are you able to share which reservation management system software you guys used?
I don't even remember. I've been through a few, and each time we switched one, it was a very painful, horrible experience. I probably have blocked it into the trauma zone somewhere out there. So I don't even remember who we used first.
What would be like a typical staffing model if you had a 50 unit property? What would you be thinking of, like, okay, here's the staff that we need to run this property successfully?
It depends largely on how the kind of level of service that you're wanting to provide, right? So there's so much variation in the glamping space between, a 2-star or a 3-star or 4-star and a 5-star place, right? So it really depends on whether you're wanting to provide daily housekeeping or not, or whether you're wanting people to bring their own bedding or not. And so there's no magic formula for, if you've got 50 tents, you need X number of people. And I certainly would not be the person to ask, because I am not the operational expert. But there's a lot of science around, what service are you trying to achieve, and what people is it going to take to be able to make that a reality? That's really the bigger question.
Hi everyone, thanks for listening. This is just a quick note to say that this podcast is brought to you by Glampitect in North America. And what we do is we help you through the process of starting a glamping business, no matter what stage you're at. So if you need to find a property, we'll tell you where the most suitable area is to start your glamping business. If you have a property, we'll look at your local zoning code and tell you how likely you are to get your project off the ground according to the zoning rules and regulations in your local area. We'll also give you a really good roadmap of permits that you'll need and regulations that you'll need to be aware of to get your glamping business off the ground. If you need financing, we'll introduce you to our range of financing partners and do you a feasibility study that will give you some really solid financial projections and market analysis that will allow you to acquire the funding that you need. If you need glamping units, we'll talk you through your options and introduce you to one of our trusted manufacturing partners to ensure that you're looked after throughout the whole process. If you need a site design, or if you need permits to move forward with your project, we've got architects who will do all your drawings, make all your arguments, and essentially allow your dream to become a reality. The list goes on, and I don't want to bore you, so I'll let you get back to the episode in a second. All I'd say is that Glampitect North America are the people to speak to about starting a glamping business in the US or Canada. So if you're even thinking of starting a glamping business, just get in touch with us at contact@glampitect.com. or 646-586-2330. All the details are in the description, and no matter what stage of the process you're at, we will be able to help, whether it's doing something ourselves or pointing you in the right direction of our partners. Just let us know that you came from the podcast, and we'll see about doing you a little discount along the way. So thanks for listening, and I'll let you get back to the episode. And so, as you start to scale, you went through the fundraising process. You went through a few trials and tribulations throughout that process. So tell us a little bit about that. How you decided to raise money to expand, and what that process looks like, and the issues you ran into doing that as well.
Yeah, well, as you alluded to at the beginning, fundraising for an industry that was not yet an industry was exceptionally hard, and it took me a very long time to raise capital, largely because we weren't a tech company, and every time I met someone, I said, "Well, you're not tech. This is not going to be valuable." And of course, that was nonsense. Of course, I was going to build something of value. I just didn't understand the parameters that people were thinking about, and not necessarily approaching the right kind of investors. And the other kind of, when I started to look at real estate kind of investors, the other struggle was, well, we don't really have real estate that's really valuable, because the kind of land that I'm using is not got alternative uses. We can't put condos on it. We're not going to build houses across it. So real estate investors weren't really getting it either. So it was a very frustrating, very challenging space to be moving in, and that's part of the problem of going first. And I call that my blessing and my curse of always trying to pioneer something and go first, because it's really hard ploughing ground when no one has ploughed it before you. And glamping certainly wasn't a thing. I was still having to explain the whole concept to people, and people were not really buying it, that it was people that it was going to be even vaguely interesting. So it was very painful. And it's still very slow. And I think the sad part about the space still is that it's still, because of the lack of collateral, because of the lack of traditional assets, it's still quite a difficult space for people to get funding in. Ultimately, our first break came from our local bank, and I still believe, local banks have a really big role to play in supporting small business and helping local people get small businesses off the ground. And that's really what our bank did for us. I should never forget the conversation I had when finally, I think it must have been after my third or fourth, maybe even fifth conversation with local bankers, where one of them finally said they would accept tents as collateral, and that I could have an equipment loan for buying tents. I could have fallen off my chair. And just the fact that they considered the tents to be collateral was an amazing gift to us. It was really, truly incredible. So that was what really helped us in the early days, along with a lot of credit cards that I was juggling balances on.
There's the risk again, taking risks in an industry that kind of hadn't really been pioneered with anyone previously. So again, as Connor said, there's a lot that's owed to you for keeping ploughing on, and your resilience and determination. So again, thank you for that. As the years went on a little bit, obviously, presumably you got a little bit more secure in how the business was doing, and you had several locations. And then towards the end of the 2010s, you received you're essentially acquired by a private equity firm. And that which rewarded you financially for all those years of hard work and the trials and tribulations. So first of all, how did that opportunity come about, and then how did it feel when you checked your bank account the next day?
Well, the company was on a financial knife edge until we raised our first sort of significant amount of capital the year prior to when we sold, which was 2017. And so we literally had sort of 8 years of financial precariousness. And whilst the business had been profitable, every year we ploughed everything we had back into growing and scaling the business and servicing our debt. And we had, sizable amounts of debt at this point. So every season was nerve-wracking, and every season was challenging. And it wasn't until sort of we really raised a very large amount of capital, which was about, I think it was $14 million, $17 million, that really put the company on a different setting and a different financial footing. And, I just went out to raise capital again the next year because we deployed all the capital we'd raised on opening more sites. And that was when a surprising offer came down the pike, and it was too good to turn down.
And you had I was listening to another podcast with you on the other day, and you had a funny story about what happened when you came home all excited to share the news that you'd just been acquired for a significant sum of money, and it wasn't quite the reception that you were hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, I'd spent any time you're ever doing a deal with, big money, it's an arduous and complicated and painful process, and I'd been slaving over getting this deal done for months. I mean, it had been a sort of 3-4 month journey, and the day it finally closed and we sold the majority of the company to a private equity fund, and the money moved, I got the phone call, the money's in the bank. Well, first I cried because I was emotionally exhausted and just couldn't believe that it was done. And then I was ready to go celebrate. It was 4 days before Christmas. It was the 21st of December, and we were going on holiday for a few weeks. We would close the office. Everyone was done. Deal was done. Ready to kick back. Pop the champagne. My husband and I drove home from the office, and my in-laws were at home with our kids, ready to, come and celebrate Christmas with us. And my mother-in-law standing at the door, and she whispered, "The kids are vomiting," as I walked in the door. I was like, "What?" She said, "I think they've got norovirus." And she was right. They both had norovirus, which meant everybody then got norovirus in succession over the next 2 weeks. So I spent 2 weeks post the sale of Under Canvas with my mom hat on, cleaning up vomit and mopping everybody's brow and vomiting myself.
God.
And trying to have a nice Christmas all at the time, which wasn't really a reality. So it definitely was like, if you're, thinking about, you're something and you've made it, and you're on the top of the world. This moment certainly sort of brought us back down to earth, and I was like, well, now here's reality. You're still a mom and you still have little kids, and people are still vomiting in your world. So
Well, it's like that question, is it better to cry in a terrible car or in a Ferrari? So is it better to have norovirus when you when you have loads of money or not?
norovirus is pants for whatever your circumstances. It's not a winner. You are not thinking about your bank account when you're throwing your guts up. That's for sure.
I'll bear that in mind in the future. So when we had Mike Munt on in the last episode, he was saying, as much as it's been a huge success now, there were obviously some very difficult moments throughout the whole journey, and you've obviously alluded to a few. Was there one particular moment that was really difficult that you really had to sort of grit your teeth and battle through along the way?
I'd say my worst 2 moments probably were fundraising. Fundraising for Under Canvas, and 2, maybe that first year in Yellowstone. I mean, there were so many things that went wrong that year. We had a massive storm roll through at one point in the summer, and it completely flattened the camp. I mean, I was sitting. We were living on site at the time in a camper, and my husband was away doing another event because we still were doing events at that time as well. I had 5 members of staff and me. And I was in the camper with my 2 small children. The biggest storm I have ever been in, certainly sitting in a camper, rolled through the camp. And the camper was literally, swaying from the wind. And I was thinking at one point, is this camper going to roll over? Should I get out with the kids and try and get into another vehicle? And eventually passed, as storms always do. But when I opened the door, I looked out at the camp, and it was flat. Like, everything we had was on the ground. There were tent poles broken, canvas, things blown over. I mean, it was carnage. I mean, how anyone ever trusted us to stay in a tent again, I have no idea. But we did hurricane-proof them after that. We designed them so they could stand up to, 180-mile-an-hour winds, which they always do now. But at the time, I was like, we're done. this is it. No one will trust us again. No one will stay with us again. We're going to go bust because I'm going to have to give everyone's money back, and now I've already spent everybody's money, so I don't know how I'm going to do that. So it was traumatic, and all I wanted to do in that moment was quit. I wanted to go hide. I was embarrassed. I was afraid, and I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to like disappear, like to have the earth swallow me up, and like just walk away from the carnage. And I tell you, if it hadn't have been for one member of my staff who said to me, this was my maintenance guy, who'd also said to me, "You're going to do more of these." He said to me, "I don't think it's that bad. I think we can come back from this." And I said to him, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "No, it's not that bad." I'm calling Jake, and I'm crying, my husband, and I'm crying on the phone, saying, "It's all terrible." And he says to me, "Give me the phone." Looks at me and says, you stop that right now. You pull yourself. I mean, he didn't say these things, but he looked at me as if to say, "You get your shit together. Like, come on, you can do this." He speaks to my husband and he says, "This isn't this bad. We can sort this. I've got this. We can put this camp back together. We've got spare poles. I'm going to call all our neighbours who can come and help us." And that's what we did. You know, he gave me the eye. I said, "Okay, I'm pulling myself together. I'm pulling myself back together." And, I have to stop focusing on disaster and have to start focusing on solutions. And that's often what happens in a business, right? We can get so fixated on what's not going right that we forget to focus on finding solutions to our problems. Because building a business is basically solving one problem after another problem, after another problem, after another problem, after another problem. And that's really what growing and scaling a business looks like. It's just constant problem solving. And so the faster you get at solving big problems and solving things that are not going right, the faster that things will go right. So we called everyone we knew in West Yellowstone. All our neighbours showed up. Our guests started pitching in and putting back tents up, and we started doling out dry bedding. And by 11 o'clock that night, we had everyone back in their bed. I didn't give a single refund out. We had the tents looking back to normal, and we were good to go. And that was a moment that was either kind of like, we're done, or no, we're going to overcome, and we're gonna keep fighting to fight another day. And it certainly was one of those moments. And without the support of many people, I would have given up that day for sure.
And I get the sense that in your case it was your husband, but just in general having a partner with you and also a wider team behind you really has helped you in all aspects of this business.
Yeah, it's really hard doing things by yourself, especially because it's not just a physical journey, right? It's also an emotional journey. And there are days when it really gets you down. It gets to you. It feels like it's too much or it's too hard. And so when there's someone else in it with you who also cares about it as much as you care about it, they can help you get back up again. And sometimes we just need each other to help getting back up. Even silly things like Connor saying to me today, like, "Hey, do you know what you did? Do you know that if you hadn't have done what you'd have done?" Which makes me think, oh, that's why I keep pioneering, right? That's why I keep breaking up ground to make things happen so other people can come behind us and do other things. But there are days when pioneering really gets my goat, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? This is too hard. This is too difficult. I don't want to keep doing this. But then something happens when you just know, no, I can keep going. I can keep doing what I do and keep persevering. But we need each other, and we need partners, we need supporters, we need encouragers, we need a village, and pioneering anything, building anything, doing anything for the first time, you need champions around you to keep helping you get back up when you're knocked down.
Okay, and so you sold the business, and you still, I think you're still kind of involved in it a little bit, but not obviously to the extent that you were 5 years ago. And you've moved on to two new ventures, Enigma Ventures and the Quivertree Collection. So could you just tell us a little bit more about those and what you're doing day to day now?
Yeah, my two current pioneering new endeavors are we have a small venture capital fund investing in female entrepreneurs in Africa. That's Enigma Ventures. And so one of my frustrations with being a female founder was it was really hard as a female to raise capital. Less than 2% of all venture funding is going to women. So one of the things I wanted to do post selling Under Canvas was invest and support other women in growing and scaling their businesses. So when we launched Enigma, we were the first fund of its kind in Africa to be investing in women and saying that investing in women is a thing. Again, nobody was wanting to believe me at the time. But now there are a few other funds that are also have a mandate to invest in women across the continent, which has been fantastic to see. And then there's Quivertree. So Quivertree Collection is our next hospitality endeavour, working on building a global portfolio of outdoor hospitality endeavours around the world that are primarily focused on conservation, biodiversity preservation, and using hospitality as a vehicle for preserving and protecting some of the most incredible, vulnerable places around the world.
Connor, I know you're kind of passionate about the sort of sustainable aspect and sort of doing good through business. Have you got any sort of questions on Enigma particularly?
About Enigma in particular, I would say if you had any advice for female entrepreneurs or anyone like trying to raise capital in their passion or their vision, maybe would you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I've just written a book which is coming out next year, which I'm very, very excited about, which is consolidating all of my advice for female entrepreneurs, because I have endless amounts of it. The book's called Thinking Bigger, and it'll be out sometime next year. So if folks want to follow me either on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's probably the best way to connect with me. I can certainly direct people to getting their hands on my book, Thinking Bigger, next year. But yeah, I mean, it is a challenging landscape for women entrepreneurs in particular. It's a challenging landscape period right now, just because the capital markets are in a big slump, and we've had obviously rising interest rates for almost a year now. So it's a very challenging times. But what I would say is for everyone, during challenging times, there are always opportunities. So it's just it's not a question of will I get funded or could I get funded? It's a question of how do you find your window of opportunity. If you keep looking and keep persevering and don't give up and figure out how you can use your circumstances to your advantage, that's really the key. And recognizing that, in difficult times, the most capable, the most creative, the most determined will find a way. The question is just whether you're going to be one of those people.
I love it, and I look forward to reading the book. I guess a follow-up question: when you were going through your fundraising efforts with Under Canvas, I guess even in having this conversation, it kind of again shows me just how remarkable it was what you were able to do in the rounds that you raised. Is probably no one had raised any sort of significant amount of money in the U.S. in glamping, and only 2% of venture capital funding goes to women. I guess with Under Canvas in particular, what would you attribute that success to, or like how did you approach the fundraising, or is there anything that you could point to? Was it the land? Was it your historicals or the brand, or how you did your pitch deck presentation?
It really was a combination. I think bootstrapping really helped us, actually, because, and often people, as you can imagine, come to me to fund them all the time or to give them advice about getting funded. But really bootstrapping our business was the best thing I possibly ever could have done, especially in a nascent space that is unproven and unknown. But having real financial credentials and a business model that I could show had traction, was really absolutely the key to that. So I could show performance. And really that's what speaks loudest to investors, right? What have you done so far? Ideas are cheap, right? Everybody has ideas. Everybody wants to open a glamping site on their favorite piece of land. Everybody does, right? But what can you prove that you have already made happen, that you've already got off the ground? And I am not talking as someone who came at this with a trust fund of money that, daddy gave me. I didn't have anything. We were living on food stamps. I had 2 small children, no income, and I was juggling credit cards to pull off our dream. So that matters to investors, right? What skin have you got in the game? What are you doing to make your dream a reality? What is it costing you to pull off? I sold it. We sold everything. We had nothing other left than what we put in the business. So don't sit in your 4-bedroom house and your car and your boat and all the rest of it and ask somebody to fund your dream. Go fund your dream, make it happen, show what you can pull off, and then people will join you. They're not going to join you on a wild hair, you've got a great idea. That's not how this works.
Amazing. We have a large audience of female listeners to this podcast as well, and I get calls quite a lot from a lot of women who are looking to start a glamping business. And do you have any advice to them specifically for navigating the kind of male-dominated landscape of venture capital and all that kind of fundraising kind of thing?
Yeah, I would just say talk in the right language. You have to, and the language that speaks the louder is just good metrics, right? Good metrics, a great vision, and a great plan. Investors are looking for people who have a great plan, they've got a good track record, and they all they need is capital to execute on the plan. So, how robust is your plan? How viable are your numbers? How have you proven what you've done so far? How good are your numbers so far? If your numbers are half-assed already, don't go out there until you've got good numbers, right? Because no one's going to take you seriously. So understand the metrics that matter. Growth matters, revenue matters, profitability matters. So work on that and borrow against your house. Borrow from your friends and family. If you believe in you and you're prepared to put your own money in the thing, someone else will too. It's really difficult to get anyone else to believe you and back you if you are not backing you. That's what I would say.
So much gold in there. We're actually in one of our next episodes, we're going to be talking specifically about fundraising. So that's an awesome little sneak peek or intro. And in the world that we live in, which is basically we stand in between owners and operators and investors, and it's so hugely important.
Mm-hmm. And so we end every podcast episode with any podcast episode that we record with a glamping operator. We ask the same question to finish it off every time. The answer is always the same, and I think yours will be the strongest yes we've ever had. But Sarah, are you happy with your decision to start a glamping business?
Absolutely yes.
There we go. That's all that we need. So Connor, thank you for coming on as your first co-hosted episode. We'll have you back on once a month or so. Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think Connor said it all in the intro as to what we owe to you in the industry. So thank you for giving up your time to coming on. And this episode, as Connor just said, is packed full of gold for prospective operators. So thank you again.
My pleasure.